Well, good morning to you, and welcome to Lake Sawyer. My name is Jake. I'm a student ministries pastor at a little church down the road, and I'm so excited to get to share with you this morning. And as I was getting ready for this morning, I thought about how much time I've spent here at Lake Sawyer, and I started coming to here when I was in 8th grade and stayed all the way through into my 20s. And in Lake Sawyer, this is like homecoming weekend for me. And so it's so great to be back with you. I, like I said, went to youth group here, met my wife here, got married here, preached here for the first time, interned, got on staff, all that kind of stuff. And so I just love that I get the chance to come back and spend some time with you. And on top of that, I love that I get to share a little bit with you as well. And so hopefully this morning is a blessing for you. And with that, I want to give you just a little bit more. Those of you who maybe didn't know me when I was here as a student, let me catch you up to speed. Just this last week, my wife and I, here we are. Actually, this one didn't happen last week, this photo. This photo didn't either. But this photo didn't happen last week. This was at Christmas. We just moved into a house that was officially big enough for like a full-size Christmas tree. It wasn't full size, and the house is barely big enough. But we went from 500 to 854. So we thought 854 square feet, let's get a real tree. So we went out and did that. And then we've been married for about 6 years. It's my wife, Kaylee, and I here. And then this is our dog, Milo, and he's nothing like having children, but he's what we got. And we took him to Disneyland because we're those people. And it was awesome. Look how happy he is. He likes it too. And so actually they have a kennel that we put him in. We didn't bring him into the park. Their kennel is so fantastic, though. They're like amazing with dogs, and they love him, and he loved the park. And he did this everywhere he went, and so little kids were like, that's the best dog ever. You can have him. No, there it is. And so it was totally great. And so that's who I am. Like I said, I live not far from here and work at a little church down the road, overseeing student ministries. So I get to hang out with middle school and high school students, which is my dream and probably your nightmare. And so with that, this week we had a middle school retreat. We went to one of those trampoline places, totally fun. We went to the Snohomish Aquatic Center. I don't know if you've ever been there. But it is the coolest city pool I have ever been to, and you should take your children. And it's cheap. It was like $6. But then on top of that, one of my favorite things from this weekend was we had students that I got to work with who taught at our middle school retreat. How cool is that? I had high school students sharing, teaching, mentoring middle school students. It was outstanding. And so that's where I'm coming from. And this week I get to share with you. I get to meet with Mike probably 3 months ago. And met him for the first time, and we had lunch, and we spent like an hour and a half just talking about life, and catching up and learning about where each other are from and ministry, and then he asked if I would come and speak, and I was like, oh my gosh, I would love to do that. And he's been totally encouraging through this whole process. And let me tell you, if I got a fraction of what you get and what your staff here at Lake Sawyer get, you guys are blessed people. Mike is outstanding. I've enjoyed the friendship that we've begun to grow, and I look forward to coming years of whatever that turns into, right? And so with that, we started a new series, and it's called Hope in the Dark. And this series is all about the fact that sometimes life gets tough. And you guys have about 3 or 4 weeks of this series leading into Easter, and 3 weeks because Easter's in 3 weeks. You've got 3 weeks of this series leading into Easter, but it's all about when life gets tough. Life gets hard, and there's not always an answer, right? And sometimes it builds, and there's no resolution. And we wonder where God is at. And so the big idea of the series is this. It is that God is good even when life is not. That God is good even when life is not. And so with that, I just I don't need to tell you much, but you know that life can be hard. As I follow what's happened here at Lake Sawyer and in the Maple Valley Black Diamond community, I'm aware of some of the things you guys have gone through. A lot of it's related to student ministries, but I'm aware, right? And I know that as a church and as a community, over the last couple of years, you've watched like 2 boys die of cancer. One that was a teen and one that was a boy. And you walked with families through that. And there aren't words for that season. There's not like hold on, it's going to get better, right? Early on in the school year, me and some other youth pastors and some parents got to stand at the front doors of Tahoma because 2 students had lost all hope and they had taken their own life right at the beginning of the school year. And you guys walked that with them. You know that life is hard. This last month, we've been looking for another student who just disappeared, and we're wondering, where did he go? And God, why aren't you showing us? Right? And down the street in Kent, it's not much better. Right, and in fact, I would say it's no better. I've been on staff for about 2 years at church I work at now, and one of our elders who was in his 50s, but one of our elders, somebody sitting in leadership at our church, died of cancer. He was like in his 50s. That's not old, right? There's no way to celebrate that. There's just hurt when you learn about that. One of my middle schoolers that came into my ministry this last summer, days before summer camp, his dad died. A middle school boy without a dad. And he's not the only one in my ministry. And then I think about it and I go, man, my children's pastor that I work with and myself, this calendar year, like 3 months, we've made multiple calls to CPS because of students that are in our ministry, because of kids that are in our ministry and who we're working with. Life is not always super, super cheery, right? And I was thinking about my own story. And as Mike asked me to teach on this topic, I was thinking about my own story. And about a year ago, after about a year of trying and meeting with doctors and tracking calendars and dates, my wife and I finally found out that my wife was pregnant. And we celebrated, but we celebrated cautiously. We said, that 8-week time period in a pregnancy is really, really volatile, right? And so we said, we're going to keep this to us, and we're going to continue to pray for what's to come. And we made it to that 10-week mark, and we thought, okay, we're safe to tell family. And so we told just our family. And they began praying with us just to hear days later that we lost the heartbeat. And many of you guys have been there. There's no words for that, right? And so I was thinking about it. I was thinking about this sermon series, and I thought, man, this is not a sermon series that's your normal sermon. It's not, right, a lot of sermons are like a sitcom where there's some tension or problem or issue right at the beginning, and then the tension builds and we begin to find a resolution and hope comes and there's resolution, right? Unless it's a mid-season finale and then they just leave you hanging and then resolution comes in the next episode, right? And a lot of the time that happens in sermons, right? We go, it's not bad, it's a great sermon, God does great things, but we go, yeah, you have a problem, I have a problem, everybody in this room has this problem, and God has an answer for it. Not only does he have an answer for it, here it is in Scripture, and then here it is in my life, or another example, and here's how you can apply it and begin to work that into your life, and let's all go home cheery and happy, right? But this series and this message isn't that way. The series and this message is going, what if day 2 isn't better? Right, we worship a God who died. We worship Jesus, he died on the cross. That's what we celebrate at Easter. But we celebrate at Easter the fact that he rose later. But you know what happened on day 2? He was still dead and life still stunk. And sometimes our day 2 is just as hard as day 1. And so a lady came up to me after first service and goes, hey, you should warn people that they might need Kleenex. And I said, okay, well, there's your warning. And so I was thinking about it going, man, sometimes day 2 is not better than day 1. And what do you do then? What does God have for you then? And so as I was looking about that, I was talking about that, we're going to this book called Habakkuk. And let me tell you a little bit about it. We're going to be in Habakkuk chapter 1. And so if you've got a Bible or a Bible app, you can go there. It'll be on the screens. We'll have it for you. But Habakkuk's an interesting book. He was a prophet. In fact, if we check this out, this is the Old Testament, and he was a minor prophet. They're minor leagues. I feel like if God talked to me on behalf of other people, and then some people thousands of years later just called me minor, I'd be like, listen here, folks. Well, Habakkuk falls in that category. You might know, if you've gone to church for a little while, major prophets. You may have heard of Isaiah or Jeremiah, and those are some major prophets. Habakkuk falls, and they've got big books, right? They've got 50 chapters or 30 chapters or whatever. Minor prophets are shorter books, but cover kind of some of the same topics. And maybe the most famous one, even if you haven't gone to church for very long, you probably heard of Jonah, the guy that got eaten by a big fish, right? And so Habakkuk falls a little bit later, and at this point, Israel has fallen into captivity a long time ago, and life has not gotten better for them. Life hasn't gotten any better for them. In fact, Habakkuk wrote about 600 years before Jesus was born, about 200 years before the Old Testament was over. So there's 4 more prophets that came after him, and then the Old Testament closes for 400 years. They don't hear anything, and then Jesus showed up. Right? And so that's the time period that Habakkuk was writing. And usually prophets, they wrote, God gave them a message, and then they send that message to the people, right? Hey, God has said for you, right? And the story of Habakkuk is totally different. Totally different because he's looking at a world that has major injustice, tons of corruption, and more violence than we could imagine. He's looking at that world. He's hearing complaints from God's people. And he's going to God to complain, right? So he's not getting a message from God that he brings to the people. Instead, he's got a message from people that he takes to God. And he's got a lot of questions for God. And this is the question that he asks. He asks this question: why doesn't God seem fair? Have you ever asked that? You lived in a situation, you've seen a situation in somebody else's lives, and you wondered, how come you did it for them and not for me? Or how come you're letting these people thrive while we suffer? And you've wondered, God, why don't you seem fair? And imagine that 2,600 years ago, people were asking the same question that you and I ask today. Go, man, God, where are you? Why don't you seem fair? Do you even see the situation and what's going on? And so with that, I want to introduce you to Habakkuk. I want to introduce you to chapter 1, and we're going to look at verse 1 here. So this is what it says. It says, the prophecy that Habakkuk the prophet received. Okay, that's verse 1, complicated, right? And so that's going, hey, this is the summary of what's to come. Habakkuk received a prophecy from God after he took our complaints to God. And this is what Habakkuk says first. This is his message to God. He goes, how long, Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save. And here's where we go next. It says this: why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing, right? I get that God's people mess up sometimes, but the people who mess up even bigger, you tolerate. Why? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Conflict is everywhere. So Habakkuk, like you and I, knows that God could intervene. He knows that God could intervene, but doesn't understand why God won't. And then he's totally honest with God, and he airs that complaint. He goes, hey, I've got something, and you aren't doing anything about it. You aren't answering my question, and so here's the answer that I hope to get. And maybe you've done this when things come crashing down. You've asked God tough questions, but right, we've all had experiences. Some of the things I shared at the beginning, and then other things like maybe you had a great job, a dream job, and you were faithfully giving and serving at your church, and then something like 2008 happened. Or maybe something even more recent and you lost your job and everybody else is talking, the economy's doing fine, and you're wondering, well, it's not fine with me. And I know people that are like that. They've lost this job and they can't get another one, or they get employed well under what they used to make, or they get employed well below their education and experience level, and they wonder, God, I was so faithful, why are you not faithful in return? Or I've known stories like this where you've loved your spouse and you've been faithful. You've done everything right, and then one day they show up and they go, it's over. Find out they've cheated, they've done something, and they move on, and then there you are left to face friends and community and the church and feel that pain and that weight. And so there's other stories too, right? Maybe you've gotten a bad medical report and you prayed and you asked God to do something about it, and you fought and you got chemo, and then it didn't work. Or then it came back. And I was thinking about this. We talk with students about being pure and keeping virginity and not doing, and then you can't find love and the friends who did whatever they wanted do, and you wonder, God, where's my significant other? Where's my spouse? Why am I still alone? Or this one that's so true with so many people, that you're faithful, but sickness still comes Depression still comes. Anxiety still just is rampaging in your life, and you're wondering, God, I'm faithful. Can you do something about this fog that I live in? Can you intervene? And of course, right, on top of the very specific things that each of us maybe feels, we see general suffering as well, and we know that starvation and racism and terrorism and school shootings and all of those things seem to be happening more and more and more frequently. And we're like, God, don't you see these things? Don't they hurt your heart too? Why do you let bad things happen? And we look at this and we ask the same question he does in verse 3, which is this: why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoings? God, intervene, right? And then verse 4, maybe that's how you would summarize today is what verse 4 says. Therefore the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. Things don't get better. And maybe you've looked at like our country or our world or your neighbors and you've thought, man, justice never prevails and things just keep tanking where I don't want them to. And again, Habakkuk airs his problems with God, and maybe we'll all understand this, but let me ask, these are some of the statements that I feel like Habakkuk feels in this passage, and maybe you feel as well. Check this out. Number one, God, you don't seem to care. Have you ever felt that way? God, you don't seem to care what I'm going through. I'm falling, and I don't feel like you're there to catch me. What about this one? You aren't doing much when you could. You aren't doing much when you could. You think, man, you're interacting in some places, but I want you to interact more, right? This next one. What you are doing doesn't seem fair. Right, you're helping them, but you're not helping them. You're intervening here, but you're not intervening there. You're letting them thrive while they suffer. Why? That doesn't seem to make sense. And all of these questions come from the same place, I believe, and this is the place they come from. God, if I were you, I'd do things differently. You ever thought that? Hey, God, I'm going to go ahead and tell you how I would handle this, and then I'll send you my consultation fee, and we're going to figure this out together, okay? Because you're not doing it my way. Right? And I feel that all the time. Sometimes I feel that. And I especially feel you aren't doing much when you could, right? I was thinking about this, and I didn't show the video, but if you've ever seen The Incredibles, I'm a youth pastor, so I like cartoons. But The Incredibles, the first one, like right at the beginning is when you start seeing the kids have powers, right? And so they're at dinner. Mom has the kids at the dinner table, and the kids start arguing and fighting. And Mrs. Incredible yells out to Bob, Mr. Incredible. She says, "Bob, I need you." And he goes, "Kids, listen to your mother," right? And that's all he does. And you're like, sometimes I feel like that's what God does. He's like seeing all of this, and then he goes, "Hey, you deal with this." Right? And then she's like, "I need you to intervene." And he comes out and shakes the kids off the table. And we're like, that's not how I would have done it, right? And I think sometimes that's how we work with faith. We think, man, God, I would do it different. I need you to intervene. I need you to get in charge. I need you to step in front of what's going on. And he doesn't. And we think this idea, hey, I would do things differently if I were you. And then oftentimes we look at that statement, we look at this statement and we think, man, well, we can't think that because we want to make ourselves God and we're too prideful, and we have sermons about not being prideful. But then I ask this question, is it ever okay to question God? And here's what I'd tell you this. It's okay to question God, right? It's okay to ask God questions. The Psalms are like, half of them are just hurting people. Asking God, where are you? I feel like I'm in the bottom of the ocean and the weight is pressing and you're not there, right? And they're crying out for God to notice. Or if we go back to the major prophets, Jeremiah and Ezekiel, all they do is they just cry out to God. In fact, Jeremiah was known as the weeping prophet because things just weren't good. He continued to share God's message and nothing changed. People didn't act. Nobody moved. Right? We read Job and Ecclesiastes and we know that, man, there's confusion, there's questions, and life might not get better. Day 2 may be just as bad as day 1. Day 2 might be just as bad as day 1 for you, right? And then I even think about when Jesus died on the cross, he said, Father, Father, why have you forsaken me? Why have you left me here? Right? And it wasn't like God came down and saved him right then and boom, it was over. No, Jesus died on day 1, and then day 2, he was still dead. And sometimes that's yours and my story. We we have a bad day, and day one's no better, or day two's no better. We get a diagnosis, and it's not gone by tomorrow. We lose a job, we haven't found a new one by tomorrow. We can't get pregnant, we still can't now. And we ask all kinds of questions. We ask all kinds of questions. And the thing is, we want to encourage you to ask God tough questions and be willing to wrestle with them. Because I think the best Christians are the ones who are willing to wrestle with God, who are willing to ask tough questions, who are willing to engage Him when it feels like we should disengage. That happens all the time in church. Something crazy happens. We have a crisis of faith. We have a moment where we begin to question God, and we pull away from community and we pull away from God. And I've called people, I've checked in with people, and it's never like, you know what, I just started a house church at my house, and hundreds of people have come to faith, and we're baptizing everything. We're baptizing everybody, not everything. Everybody, and that's heretical. And then instead it's usually, oh, well, this happened, and life got crazy, and I just backed out, right? And you go, well, why? Don't pull away. Wrestle with God. Ask questions. Find community. Do what Habakkuk did, right? And then here's what I want to do is I want to get back to Habakkuk, though. Let's get back to the story. Verse 5. It says this, look at the nations and watch. This is God responding to Habakkuk's complaints. This is God responding maybe to yours. He goes, look at the nations and watch and be utterly amazed. Yes, I'm going to be amazed. For I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. And we're like, oh yeah, God is going to intervene. He's going to act. He's going to do something. But remember, we said this isn't your normal sermon, and what if He doesn't? And check this out. Verse 6 says this. I am raising up the Babylonians. Wait, that's not me. Right? That ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwellings not their own. Okay, not me. They're ruthless. They're going to come and they're just going to take whatever they want. And then it continues with this. They don't get saved. They don't get nicer. It says no. They are feared and dreaded people. They are a law to themselves, and they promote their own honor. They could care less about anybody else. Here's the next verse. They all come intent on violence. Their hordes advance like a desert wind and gather prisoners like sand. And then here we go. They mock kings and scoff at rulers. They laugh at fortified cities by building earthen ramps. They capture them. That's crazy. The city, fortified, huge wall. They don't wheel a ramp in. They're like, watch you try to kill us. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to build a ramp while you shoot at us, okay? And so that's what they do. And they just break into a city. They're not good people. And then they sweep past like the wind and go on, right? They come in, they take what they want, they kill who they want, and they move on. Guilty people. They're not good people. Even God says they're guilty, terrible people. And then He goes, whose own strength is their God. They don't even worship me. But you know what? They're going to come through and they're going to do things you wouldn't even imagine. You thought day one was bad. Day two is just going to be worse. And we wonder right there and we go, that's not at all what I was hoping for. That's not at all what I wanted God to do. And it's certainly not what I would expect God to do. If I was God, I would do things different, right? And again, I think it's okay to question God, and I would take it one step further and say this. A committed believer can both wrestle with honest questions and doubt while having a genuine faith in God. You can be a committed believer, you can trust Him, you can have a faith in Him, but you can still wrestle and you can still ask tough questions. It's not like God is like, oh, I hope he doesn't ask that question, right? He's ready for your questions. He wants you to wrestle. And He wants you to engage. I believe some of the best Christians are the ones who engage at the toughest times. And then here's where it continues, and unfortunately, this is my fault. I didn't send this verse to Emily, so it's not on the screen, but you can look in your Bible. I promise it's there. It says this in verse 12. Lord, are you not from everlasting? This is Habakkuk's response. He hears, nothing's going to get better, dude. And this is his response. Lord, are you not from everlasting? Right, and then he adds this idea. He adds more about God's character in the coming verses. He says this, my God, my Holy One, you will never die. You, Lord, have appointed them to execute judgment. You, my rock, have ordained them to punish. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrongdoing. But then he goes, I understand, God, who you are. I get your heart and character and nature. I get it. I understand. But he asks this question at the end of verse 13. Why then Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent while the wicked swallow up those who are more righteous than themselves? Right? Hey, we're trying our best, and you let people who don't even care run over us. Why do you tolerate the treacherous? Why are you silent when the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? Habakkuk wrestles with God. Like I said, he understands God's heart and nature and mind, but he struggles with what God continues to allow to happen. And that's okay. It's a model for us to follow too, to go, you know what? I can ask tough questions. Let me remind you that God understands your pain. He sits with you. When Jesus walked on earth, when he walked among people, he wept with people who wept. God understands your pain, and the Bible is full of people who understand your pain. David was wrote most of the Psalms in his writings. Most of them were questions for God. Most of them were questions for God. And he was called a man after God's own heart. And here's the deal. God would rather you yell and argue and wrestle than walk away. He would rather you embrace on day one and embrace on day two and keep wrestling and fighting and asking questions. And see, we run from conflict, but conflict can be a good thing. And here's the deal. This whole series, this series comes from a book by the same name, Hope in the Dark. And it's written by a guy named Craig Rochelle. He's a pastor in the South. And in the book, he asks these couple of questions that I think are so key for this morning. Check this out. Here's number one. One more slide. Here we go. Number one. What if honestly acknowledging your doubts is the first step towards building a deeper faith? What if you go, hey, God, these are the questions I actually have? What if that's the first step towards a deeper faith? What about this one? What if embracing your inner secrets or your inner secret questions opens the door for maturing knowledge of God's character? I think a lot of the time when we have problems, we just pretend like they don't exist. When I was living in California, one of the guys at the church I went to, I had a crazy season of life. My parents' divorce finalized, my brother had gotten arrested, and my grandpa died, kind of all in the same little window of time. And so he checked in on me. He goes, hey, how are you? I said, I'm good, man. Like, we're doing okay, and, things are going to kind of get better and whatever. And he goes, no, dude, my mom died 6 months ago, and life sucks sometimes, and it's okay to say that. And I paused and went, oh my gosh, it totally is okay to say that, right? It's okay for life to suck sometimes, and sometimes we need to embrace those inner secrets, those things that we're saying, no, that didn't happen, I doubt it, I don't want to believe it, I don't want to investigate, I don't want to know. Here's the deal, we worship an infinite God, and we're never going to have a question that's too challenging for him. And we can go, man, if I embrace those, what if that gives me more information on God? Here's number three. What if becoming closer to God requires you to bear that which feels unbearable? Like I said, what if that requires you to open up a spot in your heart that you haven't opened up to anybody, that you've kept closed off to God? Right? James mentioned it during worship. He goes, we sing these songs, but we're never 100%. Right? And maybe there's a spot in your life that's just still tucked away that you go, God, we're not going to go there yet. But what if becoming closer to God requires you to open that door? Here's the last question, number 4. What if it takes real pain to experience deep and abiding hope? I don't want that to be true. But it is, right? What if it takes real pain to experience deep and abiding hope in God? What if that's what it takes? And I look at those questions and I think about it, and sometimes I try to misquote 1 Corinthians 10:13. It says this, right? It says, we think it's like, well, God won't allow us to have more than we can handle. He won't give us more than we can bear. No, 1 Corinthians 10:13 actually says this. It says, God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear, right? So that's about temptation. It's not about your caseload. It's not about what happens in life. It's strictly about temptation. And sometimes your caseload can be unbearable. But the second half of verse 13, I think, applies to your caseload, and it says this. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure. You know what that way out is? Sometimes it's not pretty. Sometimes it's just him. Just hanging on. It's just wrestling one more day. That's sometimes the only way out. And like I said, life sometimes is not great. Sometimes it sucks, and that's things that we've got to admit. And ultimately, it will get better. It's true, but it may not get better here. It may not get better until we pass away and we move on to heaven and we get to sit at the throne of God unhindered in front of him, and then we finally understand things. But sometimes life here doesn't randomly just all of a sudden make sense. Sometimes you don't get the job. Sometimes the cancer comes back. Sometimes you never get pregnant. Right? Sometimes the anxiety, the depression becomes overwhelming and overbearing. There's not a miracle, there's no special day, there's nothing that comes and you wonder, God, when will you intervene? I need you to see me, I need you to catch me. And you're wondering and wondering and wondering. He's like, I promise I'm there, but sometimes day 2 is no better. Right? Day 1's tough, and we know that. We said Jesus died on day 1, and on day 2 he was still dead. And we got to continue to wrestle on day 2. We got to continue to ask questions and engage with God. Habakkuk gave us that model. He gave us the model of just going, I don't understand. I understand you, I think, so why won't you do this? And I want to tell you this morning that it's okay to ask that. My encouragement is to continue to wrestle, to continue to ask questions. And over the course of this series, we hope that there'll be some more resolution for you. But today, that's what we've got. We go, there might not be the light that we see at the end of the tunnel yet. There might just be so much darkness that we can't even notice it. And I promise you, God is sitting with you in those moments, and he's welcoming you to question, and he's welcoming you to embrace, and he's welcoming you to sit with him, even though it doesn't feel like he's there. And so here's what I like to do. I always like to end with so what. I like to go, so what do I do today? And today there's not a neat bow on the package. I've just got some thoughts. So here's number 1. It's this. Acknowledge your questions. Acknowledge your questions. Write them down, record them somewhere, and then pray, yell, shout at God, and ask him, man, God, I need help understanding. I need something. Embrace with him and see what happens. Number 2 is this. What about this? Get help. That for you might just mean getting coffee with a close friend and going, oh my gosh, I just needed somebody to make me laugh. I just needed somebody to vent. I just needed somebody to be with. Thank you for being there. Maybe that means finding a mentor. Let me tell you this. In my wife and my process, and Kaylee and my process of our miscarriage, one of the most encouraging things was not hugs from random people. It was hugs from people who have been there. They know they can't say anything. There's no silver lining for that. But man, a hug does a lot, especially a hug from somebody who's been there. And so maybe you need to find somebody who's been there. Maybe you need to ask questions and go, man, I'm in this dark spot. So were you at one point, and now you're not. How? Talk to me, encourage me, give me some hope. Or maybe you need to go one step further and get counseling, and Lake Sawyer has great resources for that, and they can help you find some of that. And here's the deal. Counseling is one of those scary things where, like, we don't want to talk about that. But I'll tell you this. When you're vulnerable, when you share your story, this is proven in psychology. I'm not just making this up. It is proven that when you're vulnerable and you share, it is never seen as weakness. When you ask questions about God, nobody ever goes, well, that's a stupid question. Right? When I stood up here and shared even just a small fraction of my story, none of you thought, well, I can't believe he struggled with that. Instead, you immediately think, man, he's brave for sharing. Man, he's strong. It's amazing, right? And that's the case with everything. If anybody ever wonders, oh man, why are they struggling with that? That's because they've got their own list of problems. Any real person, I promise you, is going to go, man, it's so brave, so strong, so good that you asked for help. And especially things that if you've been hanging on to it, if it's like, well, yeah, back in 1994, I had this problem and I haven't solved it, you should get some help and solve it. And that's not weakness, that's actually strength. I want you to hear that today. And number 3 is this. Be okay with the process, because that's what it is. It's a process. It's not an answer. There's not a solution sometimes. Sometimes it's going, God, I've got questions. Friends, I want help. And then it's still day 2, and you're wondering. Be okay with asking questions. Be okay with wrestling. And just in those moments, trust that God is doing something, even if we can't see it. Let me pray for you. God, thank you so much for the promise that you are there, even when we feel like you're not. God, thank you for not being afraid of our questions. Thank you for not being afraid of wrestling with us. Thank you, God, for being a God who is bold and willing to listen. God, I pray for each person in this room. I pray this week that you'll give them a chance to ask their tough questions, to ask where you are, to embrace those places. God, I pray for the people who need to get a little help. Pray that you'll give them the boldness, that you won't let Satan take it away, that to trick them into thinking it's weakness. God, I hope and I pray for them that you'll remind them it's strength, it's bravery, it's the best thing they can do. And God, for all of us, I pray that you'll help us embrace the process. No matter how long it takes, no matter how hard it is, God, we pray that you'll help us embrace the process. And God, can you remind us that you love us even when we don't feel like you love us, even when we feel like we're falling and there's nowhere to catch us? God, can you remind us that you're there and give us that moment, that breath that we need to make it through day 2? We love you, Lord. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Let's give him a round of applause. Thank him for coming. Thank you so much, Jake. One thing that really struck me first hour, and I kind of mumbled through saying it, but I get a great chance to work with youth a lot with the youth band, and there are a lot of people over the years that God has raised up through the youth of this church, and many that are now in full-time ministry and serving, and that's just a huge blessing. So it's so cool to see God do generational things that way. And you know what? God's really excited about equipping you too. There are things ahead for you and I that we could narrowly imagine. So let's continue to lean in, be equipped by him, grow in him, and just give him an opportunity to do what he does and call us to the things he's calling us to. Well, so good being with you today. Again, what we said earlier, if you're a first to fifth time guest and you've not had a chance to meet us yet, we know in filling out those surveys last week that there's a lot of you there. So we would love to meet you face to face if we haven't had a chance to do that yet. So come on over to the Connection Zone and we can do that. And grab that little card. Maybe there's some empty seats here. If you see an Easter invite card on a seat next to you, maybe grab 2 of them and take it with you. And, go to that neighbor that you've been meaning to take cookies over to for the last 2 years and you haven't done it yet, like me. And use this as an opportunity to bring them to Easter and see God move in their lives. So good being with you. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next Sunday with a friend in tow. God bless you.